Was it revenge or was it justice? I just wanted a quiet family life, but when family drama threatened that peace and the peace of my family, I knew I had to come out of the shadows and reveal my hidden identity to ensure justice. The sandbox in our backyard was a mess, but it was a happy mess. My 3-year-old daughter, Lily, was currently burying my foot in a mountain of golden grains, giggling with that pure, unfiltered joy that only toddlers possess. I sat on the edge of the wooden frame, sipping a lukewarm juice box she had graciously handed me, wearing a stained t-shirt that said, "World's Okayest Dad." To the neighbors, to the mailman, and even to my wife's colleagues, that's exactly who I was. Zane Wolf, unemployed, stay-at-home father. The guy who spent too much time pruning hydrangeas and not enough time climbing the corporate ladder. I wiggled my toes under the sand, making Lily shriek with laughter. "Daddy, stop! You're ruining the castle!" she squealed. "Sorry, princess," I said, my voice soft. The foundation was a little shaky, just doing a safety inspection. She slapped my knee with a plastic shovel. It didn't hurt. Nothing really hurt anymore, not after what I'd been through before this life, before the quiet, before I became just Zane. I looked over Lily's head toward the edge of our property. There stood the pride and joy of my late mother, a sprawling, chaotic, beautiful English garden. It was a sanctuary of wild roses, foxgloves, and ancient oaks. It was the only thing she had left me, and it was the only place where the noise in my head truly went silent. But that silence was being threatened. I saw the sleek black sedan pull up to the curb. A man in a suit stepped out, holding a clipboard and a surveyor's tripod. I knew what this was about. I gently extracted my foot from the sandcastle. "Lily, stay here and build the tower higher, okay? Daddy has to go talk to the man." I walked over to the fence, wiping sand from my hands. The man didn't even look up as I approached. He was busy adjusting his equipment, aiming it directly at the heart of the garden. "Afternoon," I said, leaning on the fence post with a friendly smile. "Can I help you with something?" The surveyor glanced at me, taking in my messy hair and juice-stained shirt. He sneered. "Just doing the final grade check for the pavement. This lot is part of the expansion for the new Montgomery Plaza parking structure. Demolition is scheduled for Monday." Monday. My heart didn't race. My pulse didn't spike. Those reactions had been trained out of me years ago during Operation Zero. Instead, a profound stillness settled over me. "There must be a mistake," I said, my voice steady and polite. "This is private property. It's not for sale." "Eminent domain, pal. We're close enough. Mr. Montgomery wants a parking lot, he gets a parking lot. Take it up with the city council. They signed the papers this morning." I watched the surveyor drive away, the dust settling on the roses my mother had planted 30 years ago. Montgomery. The name tasted like ash. Silas Montgomery wasn't just a CEO. He was my uncle, estranged from the family since before I was born. He viewed the world as a spreadsheet and people as overhead costs. He didn't know who I was, not really. To him, I was just the nephew who failed to launch, the dropout who disappeared for a decade and came back with nothing to show for it, but a family he couldn't afford to support without his wife's salary. Speaking of Sarah, her car pulled into the driveway an hour later. She looked exhausted. Sarah was a junior partner at a prestigious law firm, brilliant and fierce, but lately the stress was carving lines into her beautiful face. She stepped out, dropping her briefcase on the pavement with a heavy thud. "Rough day?" I asked, taking the bag from her and kissing her forehead. She smelled like coffee and anxiety. "The worst," she sighed, leaning into me. "The annual High Society charity ball is tonight. The firm is sponsoring a table. If we don't make an appearance and if I don't charm the board, I might get passed over for the promotion. Again." She pulled back, looking at me with apologetic eyes. "Zane, I know you hate these things, the pretension, the fake smiles, but I really need you tonight. Montgomery's going to be there. He's the keynote speaker. If I can just get 5 minutes with him to pitch the firm's new initiative, it could change everything for us." I felt a tight knot form in my stomach. Montgomery, the man trying to bulldoze my mother's legacy. Sarah didn't know about the surveyor yet. I decided not to tell her. Not tonight. She needed confidence, not more stress. She needed a rock, not a husband complaining about a garden. Of course I'll go, I said, smoothing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. I'll be the best trophy husband you've ever seen. I'll laugh at their bad jokes and hold your purse while you conquer the world. She smiled, the tension easing slightly. Thank you. You're too good to me, Zane. I don't deserve you. You have that backwards, I whispered. As she went inside to shower, I went to the back of the closet. Pushed behind the flannel shirts and the worn-out hoodies was a garment bag that hadn't been opened in 5 years. I unzipped it slowly. Inside hung a tuxedo. It wasn't a rental. It was bespoke, tailored on Savile Row during a diplomatic trip I couldn't talk about. It was midnight blue, almost black, with a weave that could stop a knife if you didn't look too closely. I ran my thumb over the lapel. It was time to suit up. Not as the soldier I used to be, but as the man my wife needed. Transforming from playground Zane to gala Zane was a process of subtraction. I shaved the stubble, leaving a clean, sharp jawline. I styled my dark brown hair, fading the sides neatly, ensuring not a single strand was out of place. When I stepped out of the bathroom, Sarah gasped. She was wearing a stunning emerald gown that matched her eyes, but she froze when she saw me. Wow, she breathed. I always forget. Forget what? I asked, adjusting my cufflinks. They were simple silver knots, understated but heavy. How well you clean up, she said, walking over and straightening my tie. You look like you own the place. Where did you even get this suit? Thrift store find, I lied effortlessly. It was a reflex. Got lucky with the fit. She laughed, buying it because she wanted to. Well, you look like $1 million. Let's hope Montgomery thinks so too. He's difficult. So I've heard, I said, dryly. The drive to the city center was quiet. The Grand Hotel was lit up like a beacon, gold lights spilling onto the cobblestone streets. Valets in red vests were running back and forth, parking Bentleys and Rolls-Royces. I pulled our sensible 4-year-old sedan up to the entrance. The valet looked down his nose at the car until I stepped out. I didn't say a word. I just handed him the keys and placed a tip in his hand with a nod. It was a subtle thing. Posture, eye contact, the way I moved. The valet straightened up, his sneer vanishing. Enjoy your evening, sir, he said, suddenly respectful. Influence isn't about shouting. It's about projecting certainty. Inside, the ballroom was a sensory overload. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the ceiling. A string quartet played Mozart in the corner. The air smelled of expensive perfume and champagne. And there, in the center of the room, holding court like a king, was Silas Montgomery. He was a large man, red-faced and boisterous, laughing loudly at his own jokes while a circle of sycophants nodded in agreement. Sarah squeezed my arm. Okay, game face. I need to find the right moment to approach him. Stay close? Always, I promised. I scanned the room. Old habits die hard. I noted the exits, the security detail, sloppy, bored, and the sight lines. I saw a few faces I recognized from my past life, a senator, a tech mogul, but they wouldn't recognize me. I was a ghost. The survivor of Operation Zero didn't exist in their world. I was just the husband. We circulated for an hour. I played my part perfectly. I fetched drinks, I laughed politely at dull stories about golf handicaps, and I deflected questions about what I did for a living with self-deprecating humor. Oh, I manage a very demanding client, I told a curious banker. She's 3 years old and has a very strict nap schedule. The banker chuckled condescendingly. Must be nice, a life of leisure. It has its moments, I smiled, letting the insults slide off me like water. I checked my watch. The speeches were about to start. Sarah was getting anxious. Montgomery was moving toward the VIP section, and her window of opportunity was closing. I'm going in, she whispered. Wish me luck. You don't need luck. You're the smartest person in this room, I encouraged her. She approached the circle around Montgomery. I hung back a few feet, close enough to intervene if necessary, far enough to let her shine. Mr. Montgomery? Sarah asked, her voice clear. Sarah Jenkins from Sterling & Co. I was hoping to have a moment to discuss the liability clauses for the new waterfront project. Montgomery turned, his eyes glazing over as he looked at her. He didn't see a brilliant lawyer, he saw an interruption. "Not now, sweetheart. Can't you see I'm talking to the deputy mayor?" The dismissal was rude, but Sarah was tough. She persisted. "It will only take a moment, sir, and it could save the company millions in potential litigation." Montgomery frowned, his face darkening. Then his eyes drifted past her and landed on me. He squinted, recognition dawning, but not the kind I wanted. Well, Montgomery boomed, ignoring Sarah completely. "If it isn't little Zane, my wayward nephew." The circle of elites turned to look at me. The spotlight was sudden and hot. "Hello, Silas," I said, keeping my voice low and even. "It's been a long time." "Not long enough," Montgomery laughed, looking around for validation. "Last I heard, you were digging ditches in some foreign country. Now you're wearing a tuxedo? Who did you borrow that from?" Sarah looked between us, shocked. You know each other?" "Know him?" Montgomery smeared. "I paid for his boarding school until he ran away to join the military. And look at him now, still riding someone else's coattails. Tell me, Zane, does your wife know she married a professional quitter?" The room went quiet. The string quartet seemed to falter. Insults in high society are usually veiled in politeness, delivered with a smile. This was brute force. This was a public shaming. Sarah stepped forward, her face flushing with anger. "Excuse me, Mr. Montgomery, but my husband is—" I placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, silencing her. I didn't need defending, and I wouldn't let her burn a bridge for my sake. I looked Montgomery in the eye. My pulse remained steady at 50 beats per minute. "I'm happy, Silas," I said, smiling genuinely. "I have a family. I have a home. That's enough for me." "A home?" Montgomery cackled. "You mean that dilapidated shack your mother left you? The one sitting on my future parking lot? I did you a favor, boy. I'm tearing that eyesore down on Monday. You should thank me. I'll even give you fair market value for the land, minus the demolition costs." Sarah gasped. "Zane, what is he talking about?" "We can discuss it later," I murmured to her. "Ambition is for men who work, Zane," Montgomery continued, poking a finger toward my chest. He didn't touch me. Instinctively, he stopped an inch away, perhaps sensing something reptilian in my stillness. "Some men build empires. Others play in the sand. You were always soft, just like your mother. She cared more about flowers than the future." That stung. The mention of my mother. My fingers twitched, a micro-movement that would have been a lethal strike in another life, but here it was just a nervous tick. I forced my hand to relax. "The garden stays, Silas," I said softly. It wasn't a plea. It was a statement of fact. "We'll see," he scoffed. "Now run along. The adults have business to discuss. And take your wife with you. I don't hire firms who employ people with such low connections." He turned his back on us, the ultimate dismissal. Sarah was trembling, tears of humiliation welling in her eyes. "Zane, I'm so sorry. I didn't know." "It's okay," I said, guiding her away from the circle. "Take a breath, go to the powder room, fix your makeup. I'll handle this." "Handle what? He's the most powerful man in the city. He just fired my firm." "He thinks he is," I said, "but the night isn't over." I watched Sarah walk away, her shoulders slumped. The anger finally settled in, not the hot, flashy anger of a bar fight, but the cold, calculating resolve of a sniper adjusting for windage. Montgomery had crossed the line. He hadn't just insulted me, he had hurt my wife and threatened my home. He had mistaken silence for weakness. Suddenly, a commotion erupted near the main entrance. The heavy double doors were thrown open, and a flurry of security guards rushed in, looking panicked. The head of event security, a man I recognized as a former local cop, looked pale. "Stop! You can't enter!" he was shouting. A tall, imposing figure in a formal military dress uniform strode through the doors, flanked by 4 stone-faced bodyguards. The man was elderly, but built like iron, his chest heavy with medals.
He shouted something in a language that sounded like angry Russian mixed with a dialect from the Caucasus Mountains. The room froze. The music stopped. Montgomery, sensing a disturbance in his kingdom, marched over. "What is the meaning of this?" Montgomery bellowed. "Who let these people in? This is a private event." The military man ignored him, scanning the room with intense, desperate eyes. He barked another command to his guards. They began pushing people aside, not violently, but with the unstoppable force of professionals. "Security!" Montgomery screamed. "Throw them out!" The event's security hesitated. They were outgunned, and they knew it. The atmosphere shifted from awkward to dangerous in seconds. The elderly man was General Kalin, the Minister of Defense for a small but strategically critical nation, a nation that was currently deciding whether to award Montgomery Corp a billion-dollar infrastructure contract.
But Montgomery didn't know that. He just saw a foreigner crashing his party. "I demand you leave," Montgomery yelled, stepping into Kalin's path. Kalin's bodyguards tensed, hands moving toward their jackets. This was it, the flashpoint. If Kalin was insulted, the contract was gone. If his guards reacted, people would get hurt. Montgomery was about to cause an international incident because of his ego. I set my champagne glass down on a passing tray. I adjusted my cuffs. It was time to go to work. I moved through the crowd. I didn't run. I flowed. I slipped between gaps in the panicked guests, invisible and silent. I reached the center of the confrontation just as one of Kalin's guards grabbed Montgomery's wrist. Montgomery shrieked. "Release him," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it had a peculiar resonance. I spoke in Kalin's native dialect, a rare mountain tongue known only to a few thousand people. The bodyguard froze. He looked at me, eyes widening in shock. He released Montgomery, who stumbled back, rubbing his wrist. "Who said that?" General Kalin whipped around. His fierce eyes landed on me. He squinted, confused by the tuxedo, the clean-shaven face, the lack of tactical gear. "It is a good night for a walk, General," I said in his language, using a code phrase that hadn't been spoken since the extraction point at Operation Zero. "But the wolves are sleeping." Kalin's mouth dropped open, the color drained from his face, then returned in a rush. He took a staggering step forward. "Ghost," he whispered in English. Is it you?" Montgomery recovered his wits. "You know this waiter?" he spat, gesturing at me. "Get him out of here too." Kalin didn't even hear him. He was staring at me as if he were seeing a resurrection. "We thought you were dead. The explosion, the collapse, only silence on the comms." "I survived," I said simply, switching back to English so the room could understand. "I retired, General. I sought peace." "Peace," Kalin repeated, tears forming in his hardened eyes. "You gave my country peace. You gave my family life. My daughter, she is alive because of you." The room was dead silent. The elite of the city were watching, confused and captivated. The stay-at-home dad, the failure, was being addressed by a foreign dignitary with the reverence usually reserved for saints. "I am just a father now, General," I said gently, "and a husband. I am no longer Zero." Kalin nodded, wiping his eyes. He straightened up and snapped his heels together. In the middle of the ballroom, the Minister of Defense and his 4 elite guards snapped a sharp, crisp salute. It was a salute of absolute deference. I didn't return the salute. I wasn't a soldier anymore. I just nodded, acknowledging the respect. "At ease, General," I said softly. Kalin relaxed, a broad smile breaking across his face. He stepped forward and embraced me in a bear hug, disregarding all protocol. "My friend, my savior, to think I would find you here in this place." Sarah had returned from the powder room. She stood at the edge of the circle, her hands covering her mouth. She looked from the general to me, her eyes wide with disbelief. She saw the way the most dangerous men in the room deferred to her husband, the man who made peanut butter sandwiches and watched cartoons. Montgomery was vibrating with rage and confusion. He pushed forward. "What is going on here? General Kalin, this man is a nobody. He's my unemployed nephew."
If you want to discuss the infrastructure contract, you should be talking to me, not the help." Kalen turned slowly to face Montgomery. The warmth vanished instantly. His face became a mask of stone. "Nephew?" Kalen asked, his voice dripping with ice. "You say this man is your family?" "Unfortunately," Montgomery sneered, "but don't worry, he has no influence here." Kalen looked at me, then back at Montgomery. He laughed. It was a cold, harsh sound. "You are a fool, Mr. Montgomery. You seek to build roads in my country? You seek my favor, and yet you insult the only man on this earth to whom I owe my life?" Montgomery stammered, I didn't know." "This man," Kalen pointed at me, "is the reason my nation still exists. He walked into the fire when the world turned its back. He is not a nobody. He is a legend. And if he is your family, you should be on your knees thanking God for the honor." Montgomery looked pale. The investors in the room were whispering. The deputy mayor was backing away from Montgomery. The power dynamic hadn't just shifted, it had inverted. Montgomery choked. "Zane?" I stepped forward. I didn't puff out my chest. I didn't raise my voice. I just stood there, calm and anchored. "Silas," I said, "about the garden." The room held its breath. This was the moment. The confrontation wasn't physical, it was social execution. Montgomery looked small. His bluster was gone, replaced by the terrified realization that he had miscalculated everything. The garden?" Montgomery squeaked. "My mother's garden," I clarified. "The one you plan to pave over on Monday." Kalen stepped in, his voice booming. "You wish to destroy the home of the ghost? You wish to insult his mother's memory?" No, of course not." Montgomery waved his hands frantically. "It was a clerical error, a misunderstanding. The parking lot, we can put it underground or somewhere else entirely." I looked at him, my gray eyes soft but unyielding. "I don't want a workaround, Silas. I want the land designated as a protected green space, permanently. I want the deed transferred to a trust for my daughter, tonight." Montgomery looked at the crowd. He looked at the general, whose guards were looking at Montgomery like he was a target. He looked at the investors who were judging his every move. "Done," Montgomery said, his voice cracking. "I'll have the lawyers drafted up immediately. Tonight, consider it a gift for the family." "And Sarah," I added, gesturing to my wife. She walked forward, still stunned. "Sterling & Co.," I said. "You insulted her firm. You dismissed her." Montgomery swallowed hard. "My apologies, truly, Mrs. Wolf. I would be honored to hear your proposal regarding the waterfront project. In fact, if your firm is representing the family, I think we should make Sterling & Co. our exclusive legal counsel for the international expansion." Sarah blinked. That account was worth millions. It was a career maker. It was a partner maker. I'll have the papers sent over in the morning," Sarah managed to say, her voice regaining its professional steel. "Excellent," I said. "Then we have an understanding." I turned to Kalen. "General, I cannot stay. My daughter wakes up early and I have a castle to rebuild." Kalen bowed, a deep, formal bow. "Go, my friend, but you must promise me one thing. Dinner next week. No suits, just old friends." "I'll make the reservations," I promised. We walked out of the ballroom. The silence followed us until the doors swung shut. The valet brought the car around, our humble 4-year-old sedan. This time, as I opened the door for Sarah, the valet didn't just nod, he scrambled to help. We drove in silence for 10 minutes. The city lights blurred past. Finally, Sarah turned in her seat to look at me. Her expression was a mix of awe, confusion, and love. "Zane," she whispered, "who are you, really?" I kept my eyes on the road, my hands loose on the steering wheel. "I told you, honey. I'm Zane. I'm Lily's dad. I'm your husband." "You're the
Ghost, she said. Operation Zero? Zane, you speak a language from the Caucasus Mountains. You have the Minister of Defense on speed dial, metaphorically. You saved a country? I sighed, pulling the car up to a red light. I looked at her. A long time ago, I was someone else. I did things that were necessary, but they were heavy. When I met you, when I held Lily, I realized I didn't want to carry that weight anymore. I wanted to be light. I wanted to be the guy who worries about sandcastles and hydrangeas. She reached out and touched my cheek. Her hand was warm. You never told me. I wanted to protect you from it, I said. My past, it's not wholesome. It's not pretty. I wanted our life to be everything my past wasn't. You protected us tonight, she said softly. You didn't raise a hand. You didn't yell. You just existed, and you brought a tyrant to his knees. He defeated himself, I said. Ego is a heavy burden to carry. The light turned green. I drove us home, back to the quiet street, back to the house that was safe. When we pulled into the driveway, the moonlight was hitting the garden. The roses looked silver in the pale light. The surveyor's stakes were still there, sticking out of the ground like ugly scars. I got out of the car, walked over to the nearest stake, and pulled it out of the earth. I tossed it into the trash bin. Monday is going to be a quiet day, I said. The next morning, the world was back to normal, or at least my version of normal. Lily was awake at 6 a.m., demanding pancakes. I was in the kitchen, flipping batter on the griddle, wearing my world's okayest dad shirt again. Sarah came downstairs a little later. She looked rested for the first time in months. She walked into the kitchen, holding her phone. You won't believe this, she said, grabbing a piece of bacon. The managing partner just called. Montgomery Corp sent over the retainer agreement at 2 a.m. It's signed. I'm being promoted to senior partner effective immediately. I smiled, flipping a pancake onto a plate. That's great news, honey. You earned it. I didn't earn it, she said, leaning against the counter and watching me. You did. I just facilitated a conversation, I shrugged. You're the lawyer. You're the one who has to do the work. She laughed, shaking her head. And the garden? Courier arrived 10 minutes ago. I pointed to a thick envelope on the table. Deed of trust. The land is protected in perpetuity. No parking lots. Ever. Lily tugged on my shorts. Daddy, syrup! Coming right up, boss, I said. Sarah watched us. So, are we going to have dinner with General Kalin next week? If you want, I said. He's a loud eater, but he tells good stories. Just don't ask him about the incident in the tunnel. He gets emotional. She walked over and hugged me from behind, burying her face in my back. I love you, Zane. I love the guy who flips pancakes, and I love the guy who scares warlords. But I'm glad you're here. I'm not going anywhere, I promised. A week later, I was back in the garden. The threat was gone. The air felt lighter. I was pruning the rose bushes, the thorns scratching harmlessly against my gloves. Lily was nearby, helping by watering a patch of dirt that contained absolutely no plants. A car slowed down on the street. It was Montgomery. He didn't stop, he didn't look, he just kept driving, his eyes fixed rigidly on the road ahead. He looked smaller than I remembered, defeated not by violence, but by the weight of his own insignificance in the face of true service. I went back to pruning. People think strength is about how hard you can hit or how loud you can shout. They think power is a corner office or a parking lot named after you. But real power is having the capacity to destroy everything around you and choosing instead to plant a flower. I am Zane Wolf. I am the survivor of Operation Zero. I am a ghost to the world, a legend to a few, and a nobody to most. Daddy, look, a worm! Lily shouted, holding up a wriggling earthworm with delight.
I put down my shears and walked over, wiping sweat from my forehead. I knelt down in the dirt, my gray eyes crinkling with a smile. "That's a good one, Lil," I said. "Let's put him back in the garden. He has work to do." And so did I. The hydrangeas weren't going to prune themselves.